A brilliant sunrise spread across the Kansas countryside. The first light of day filtered through the spindly branches of a small forest edging the fields. Pale golden rays slipped between the leaves, casting soft beams onto the dewy grass, revealing a strange little creature standing motionless in a clearing. It was small, no more than 16 inches long, with a sleek, gently curved body like a squirrel, covered in fine, pale green fur that blended into the grass. A silvery stripe ran down its back, shimmering like spider silk when the sunlight touched it. Its large, round amber eyes gazed upward, pupils narrowed into slits, as if watching something from afar. The tip of its fluffy tail gave off a faint glow, flickering like a tiny flame in the morning mist. Suddenly, a burst of laughter echoed through the air. A child's voice, clear and bright. The creature flinched, its small triangle-shaped ears folding back. In a blink, it darted away, gliding over the grass without a sound. A few sparkles trailed behind, as the silver hairs on its back caught the light. Within seconds, it had disappeared into the thick underbrush, as if it had never been there at all. Not far from the woods, Eli Turner walked along a dusty red path, holding tightly to the small hand of his daughter, Lily. They were on their way home after a short visit to the farmer's market in the nearby town. Eli, 47, was a sturdy man with a weathered face, sun-tanned skin, and black hair streaked with gray. He wore a flannel shirt with worn shoulders, faded jeans, and scuffed-up boots, an image straight out of rural Kansas. Lily skipped beside him, her blue eyes shining, blonde ponytail bouncing with each step. At 9 years old, she was the only light in Eli's life since her mother, Anna, had passed away from illness 3 years earlier. "What did you like best at the market?" Eli asked, his deep voice warm as he glanced down at her. "The honey waffles," Lily answered instantly, grinning wide. "But you didn't buy any. You're such a cheapskate." Eli chuckled quietly, a rare sound from a man of few words. "I'll make you some dried apple pastries instead, just like your mom used to. I still remember how she made them." He ruffled her hair, his eyes softening for a moment as he spoke of Anna. They kept walking, their shadows stretching long across the dirt path in the early sun. In the distance, Eli's farm came into view, a modest wooden house nestled between sprawling fields of corn and soybeans. It was where Eli was born, where he grew up, and where he now raised Lily. He loved this land, not just because it fed his family, but because it was part of a promise he made to his father. "The land is life, Eli. You have to take care of it." The farm wasn't big, but to Eli, it was everything. Back home, Eli dropped the seed bags on the porch and jumped right into his daily chores. He checked the water system by the greenhouse and tilled a corner of the cornfield, his calloused hands moving with practiced rhythm. Lily, as usual, quickly found her own adventures. She ran to the chicken coop, played with the ducks, then grabbed a wooden stick and wandered down the narrow trail behind the barn, a little path overgrown with weeds and full of the damp smell of soil. She hummed a tune her mother used to sing, "Wind across the field, carrying dreams." Then she stopped, eyes wide. Just a few steps ahead, the ground in a small clearing was moving, like it was breathing. Grass sprouted up unnaturally fast, little green shoots reaching towards the sky in mere seconds. And there, in the middle of it all, stood a tiny creature with silver shimmering fur and glowing amber eyes staring right at her. Lily held her breath, catching a glimpse of its flickering tail, like a living firefly. Suddenly, a loud clack came from the barn, probably a chicken knocking over a piece of wood. The creature startled and dashed away in a flash, vanishing into the nearby brush, leaving a few sparkles in the air behind it. Lily stood frozen, her heart pounding. She wasn't exactly sure what she had just seen, but the images clung to her mind. Those amber eyes glowing like twin flames, the silver fur shimmering like moonlight, and the way the grass had sprung to life around it, so fast, so strange. It wasn't a fox, she whispered, gripping the stick in her hand. A flood of questions raced through her head. What was it? How did it make the grass grow like that? And why was it here on her dad's land? She spun around and ran, her little feet splashing through the dewy grass. Her chest was tight with a mix of wonder, excitement, and a hint of fear. She didn't know what that creature was, but one thing was certain. She wanted to see it again. Next time she wouldn't let it slip away so easily. "I have to tell Dad. He'll believe me, won't he?" she told herself. Though deep down, she knew he didn't usually go for anything out of the ordinary. But this time was different. She'd seen it. And she wasn't about to forget. Eli was checking the water line by the greenhouse when he heard Lily calling out, "Dad! Dad!" He looked up to see her racing toward him, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "I saw something weird! Behind the barn!" she gasped, waving her arms as she caught her breath. It was tiny, and its fur was shiny and glowing, and its eyes were huge, and it made the grass grow really fast. But then it ran away? Eli rested a hand on her shoulder and gave a gentle smile. "Maybe it was just a little fox, sweetheart. We've got lots of foxes out here in Kansas." His voice was steady and low, trying to calm her curiosity. But inside, he wasn't so sure. Foxes didn't make grass grow, and they definitely didn't shimmer. He glanced towards the back of the barn, silently noting the direction Lily had pointed. A strange feeling passed through him. Not worry, exactly, but something closer to curiosity, like when he was a boy and found a bird's nest in the old oak tree. "Come on now, let's get some breakfast," Eli said, giving her hair a quick tousle. "This afternoon I'll go take a look, all right?" Lily nodded, but her bright blue eyes still sparkled, like an adventure had just begun. In her mind, those amber eyes and the silver stripe were still vivid. As for Eli, even as he returned to his work, he couldn't shake what she'd said. He thought he knew every inch of this land. But maybe, just maybe, it still had some secrets to share. The Kansas afternoon breeze was cool and clean, rustling through the tall green corn stalks, making them sway like waves on a quiet sea. Eli Turner stood in the middle of his field, his old baseball cap shading his deep brown eyes from the slanting sunlight. After breakfast, he'd let Lily play with the chickens in the yard while he went about his chores, checking soil moisture, watering the soybean rows, and fixing a loose section of fence near the greenhouse. But all day, Lily's story about the strange creature kept tugging at the back of his mind. "Shiny fur, big eyes, makes the grass grow fast," Eli muttered to himself, shaking his head with a small chuckle. He'd lived in Kansas his whole life and never heard anyone talk about anything like that out in the fields. Maybe it was just some small animal, like a fox or a weasel, caught in the morning light and twisted by a child's imagination. Still, something about Lily's eyes, so wide, so sure, made it hard to brush off completely. He decided to check behind the barn, not because he believed something magical was out there, but because he wanted his daughter to feel heard, to know he took her seriously. Grabbing a small hoe, Eli walked along the narrow path through the weeds, the scent of damp earth rising with each step. A few chickens clucked somewhere nearby as he reached the spot Lily had described. At first glance, it looked like nothing special, just a patch of ground about 3 feet wide, tucked between the trail and some overgrown bushes. But when Eli crouched down, he paused. The soil here was unusually soft, like it had just been turned, even though he hadn't touched this area in weeks. And the grass, young, green, and vibrant, was taller than anything around it. It looked almost like it had been fed something magical. Eli reached down and touched the soil, letting the fine dirt slip between his fingers. He frowned and used the hoe to dig a little. There were no signs of insects or natural fertilizer that could explain what he was seeing. He stood up and looked around. The wind still blew gently through the trees, but everything was quiet. No movement, no sign of any creature. "Strange," he murmured, his deep voice breaking the stillness around him. Meanwhile, Lily wasn't one to sit still for long. After feeding the ducks, she decided to return to her secret spot. She brought along a small cloth bag filled with dried apple slices, the kind her mom used to make, the ones she and Dad loved. "If it comes back, I'll give it something to eat," she thought, her blue eyes lighting up with the idea. She walked carefully along the overgrown trail, trying not to make as much noise as she had that morning, hoping the strange little creature might return. When she got there, she saw her dad already standing in the clearing, hoe in hand, staring down at the ground. "Dad," she called, running up to him. "Did you see anything? I told you. It made the grass grow so fast." Eli turned and gave her a soft smile. "Yeah, the soil here's definitely odd. But no creature yet, sweetheart." He pointed at the fluffy, loose dirt. "You're sure this is where it happened?" Lily nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. It was tiny, with glowing fur and huge eyes, like two little gems. I'm not making it up, Dad." She knelt down and placed the small bag of apple slices beside the patch. "I'll leave this here. Maybe if it likes them, it'll come back." Eli looked at her and said nothing for a moment. He didn't want to dampen her excitement, even if he wasn't sure he believed. "All right, leave it there. I've got to check on the greenhouse. You head back before it gets too late," he said, patting her shoulder. In the days that followed, Eli began paying more attention to the area near the barn. He didn't talk about it, but every time he passed by, he glanced toward that patch of earth. What struck him was that the soil remained just as soft, and the grass seemed even greener, spreading into nearby dry areas that usually struggled to grow anything. One afternoon, while checking the soybean rows near the greenhouse, he noticed a few plants in one corner growing much faster than the others. The stems were thicker, the leaves a rich green, even though he hadn't given them any extra water or fertilizer. At night, after Lily had gone to sleep in her small room, Eli would sit out on the porch, listening to the wind whisper through the fields. A few times, he heard strange rustling sounds from the direction of the greenhouse, like dry leaves being stepped on, but they were quick, faint. He grabbed his flashlight and went to check, but there was nothing. Just darkness, the chirping of crickets, and a few swaying shadows. "Must be the wind," he told himself, but something inside him began to wonder. Something was happening. Something he couldn't quite explain. A few days later, Lily burst into the house yelling, "Dad, the apple slices are gone!" Eli looked up from the wooden table where he'd been fixing an old mousetrap. "The ones I left the other day! They're all gone," she said, tugging at his sleeve as she led him back to the trail behind the barn. Sure enough, the small bag was empty, lying neatly beside the bush, not a crumb left inside. Eli frowned and knelt down to inspect it. No clear footprints, no scattered bits of food, just an empty bag, like something had taken it cleanly. "Probably a squirrel or a bird," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Lily shook her head hard. "No way, Dad. Squirrels don't take whole bags, and birds don't eat everything like that. It was it. I just know it." Eli didn't answer right away. He stood up and looked at her, eyes thoughtful. He didn't want to argue, but in the back of his mind, a small idea had started to grow. Maybe she was right. To ease her mind, he nodded and said, "All right then, leave more. Let's see if it comes back." Lily beamed and ran back into the house to grab a few more pieces of dried apple. She carefully placed them at the same spot as before. This time, she leaned in and whispered to the empty patch of earth, "If you like these, come back. I won't scare you away." Eli stood a few steps behind her, quietly watching. He couldn't help but smile at his daughter's innocence. But deep inside, something else was beginning to stir. Curiosity. The next night, under a pale wash of moonlight over the fields, Eli decided to check the irrigation system one last time before bed. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside, the cold night air turning his breath into little clouds of white. As he passed the greenhouse, he came to an abrupt stop. In the weak beam of his light, he spotted something on the ground, a tiny footprint. It was no larger than a cat's paw, but it had only 3 toes. What startled him most was that it shimmered faintly, like silver dust glowing in the dark. Eli knelt and touched the print. It felt cold, but not wet, as if something had passed through without leaving the kind of trace any normal creature would. He stood back up, his eyes drifting toward the barn. His heart beat a little faster. "That's not from any ordinary animal," he whispered, finally admitting what Lily had believed from the start. Something was living on this land, and it wasn't like anything he'd ever known. The Kansas sky was usually calm, but not today. From early morning, gray clouds had rolled in, piling on top of one another like mountains in the sky, blocking out the usual golden light. The wind picked up, carrying the heavy scent of damp earth and distant rain. Eli Turner stood on the porch, his brown eyes scanning the sky, his hand gripping the brim of his old baseball cap. He could feel it. A real storm was coming. Not the light kind that passed in an hour, but a hard, roaring thunderstorm that could knock over the tallest stalks of corn. "Lily, come inside," he called, his deep voice edged with urgency. He turned to see her playing near the chicken coop, drawing lines in the dirt with a wooden stick. "It's gonna rain soon," he added, stepping off the porch. "But I haven't found the white hen yet, Dad," Lily called back, frowning. "She ran off this morning." Eli sighed and started walking her way. "All right, I'll help you look, but we have to be quick before the rain hits." He knew his daughter well, stubborn and gentle-hearted, just like her mom had been. They split up to search the yard, Eli checking under the shed roof, and Lily darting toward the fence near the greenhouse, where she thought the hen might be hiding. But the storm didn't wait. Within minutes, the wind was howling, whipping up dust and dry leaves into swirling clouds. Heavy drops began to fall, drumming loudly against the wooden roof like 1,000 tiny hammers. Eli looked up. The sky had darkened into a deep slate, and flashes of lightning flickered on the horizon. "Lily, inside! Now!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the wind. "I found her, Dad," Lily called back from near the narrow creek that marked the edge of the farm. Eli ran toward her, heart pounding, and saw her crouched down, clutching the small white hen, soaked and shivering. But before he could reach her, thunder cracked through the sky, a deep roar that made the ground tremble. Rain came pouring down like a waterfall, blurring everything in front of him. "Lily, come here!" he yelled, but the sound of the wind and rain drowned his voice. Lily stood up, holding the hen close, and started running toward him. The ground was slick beneath her feet, and in one quick moment, she lost her footing. With a sharp cry, she slipped and tumbled into the creek. "Dad!" her voice rang out, and then was swallowed by the roar of the rain. Eli bolted forward, panic crashing into his chest. The creek wasn't deep, but the storm had turned it into a fast-moving current, more than enough to sweep away a 9-year-old girl. When Eli reached the edge of the creek, his breath caught in his chest. Lily was in the water, clinging to the muddy bank with one hand. The current had risen to her shoulders, and her wide blue eyes were filled with fear as she struggled to call out for him. But what froze Eli in place was what he saw beside her. A small creature, glowing faintly in the stormy darkness, its whole body braced against Lily to keep her head above the rushing water. Its fur shimmered like silver, its amber eyes lit up with a strange intensity, and the tip of its tail flickered like a tiny lantern in the rain. It wasn't big, but the way it held firm against the current, anchoring itself and Lily, showed a surprising strength. "Lily!" Eli shouted, plunging into the creek. He grabbed his daughter and pulled her to the bank, cold rain soaking through his clothes. The creature leapt back the moment he arrived, standing a few feet away, ears drooping from the downpour. Eli held Lily close, quickly checking her over. "You okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" he asked, voice trembling. Lily coughed, rainwater streaking down her face. I'm okay, Dad. It saved me," she whispered, pointing toward the small creature. Eli looked up, and for the first time truly saw it. It didn't run. It didn't flinch. Its smooth coat glistened in the dim light of the storm, as if dusted with morning frost, and those glowing amber eyes stared right at him. Not like a wild animal, but with something more, like patience, like understanding. Eli felt his heart slow, not from fear, but from something else entirely. Whatever this thing was, it had saved his little girl. "Dad, I told you," Lily said, her voice weak but filled with wonder. "It's not a fox. It's something special." Eli didn't respond right away. He stood up, lifting Lily in his arms, and trudged back through the muddy path toward the house. The creature stayed where it was, watching them go but made no move to flee. The rain kept falling, but the thunder had rolled farther off now, as if the storm itself was stepping back to let this moment be. Eli glanced back one last time and saw the creature dip its head, almost like a nod, as if it understood that Eli had finally accepted it. Back at the house, Eli set Lily down near the fireplace and wrapped a towel around her shoulders, gently drying her soaked hair. "You cold?" he asked. "I'll get you a sweater." But even as he spoke, his eyes drifted toward the window, where the last sheets of rain were falling. Lily held the white hen tightly in her lap, tucked into a small basket they'd brought in, and gave a soft smile. "Dad," she said, "it wasn't afraid of me. It really saved me." Eli sat down beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know," he said quietly but firmly. There was no doubt left in his mind. Whatever that creature was, some strange animal, a miracle of nature or something beyond understanding, it had saved Lily. And that was enough to change everything. That night, after Lily was sound asleep under a thick blanket, Eli sat alone on the porch, staring out at the darkened fields. The rain had stopped, leaving only a whisper of wind rustling through the corn stalks. He didn't hear any odd rustling like on previous nights, but something new had settled in his heart. A quiet shift. This land, the one he thought he knew corner to corner, now seemed to hold something more. And for the first time, Eli didn't feel the need to figure it out. As long as Lily was safe, and that little creature was still out there somewhere, that was enough. Kansas slowly returned to calm after the heavy storm. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the thinning clouds, falling across the damp cornfields and making the leftover rain glisten on the leaves. Eli Turner stood on the porch, a hot mug of coffee warming his hands, his breath fogging slightly in the cool morning air. He hadn't slept much. His mind kept replaying the image of Lily slipping into the creek, and that glowing creature with amber eyes holding her above the water. He didn't call it a fox anymore, or a weasel. It was something else, something he didn't have a name for. But one thing was certain. It wasn't just an ordinary animal. Inside the house, Lily was already up, her small feet buzzing around the kitchen with endless energy. She wore the green sweater her mother had knitted, her blonde hair tied up high, and her blue eyes sparkled as she retold the events of the night before. "Dad, I swear it wasn't scared of me. It really saved me," she said, bouncing as she held a piece of dried apple, her and Eli's favorite treat since Anna passed away. Eli smiled and set his coffee cup down on the worn wooden table. "I believe you now," he said, his deep voice soft. "But no more running off, okay? I never want to go through anything like last night again." He ruffled her hair gently, his eyes still clouded with the memory of almost losing her. Lily nodded, but her thoughts were clearly elsewhere. "Dad, I want to go see it again. I think it's still nearby." She pointed toward the barn where everything had started. Eli frowned, ready to say no, but then he saw the excitement in her eyes. With a sigh, he gave in. "All right, but we go together. And bring an umbrella. It might rain again." The two stepped outside, Eli carrying an old, faded umbrella, and Lily holding the little bag of dried apple slices like a peace offering. The air after the storm smelled fresh, rich with soil, sweet corn, and damp grass. They followed the narrow path behind the barn, the same place where Lily had first seen the strange creature. Eli watched everything carefully. The ground felt looser than usual, and in spots, the grass was greener than it should have been, even with the heavy rain that had washed through the night before. Lily stopped and knelt near the bush where she'd left the apples last time. "It's here. I know it is," she whispered, gently placing the bag down. Eli stood behind her, saying nothing, but his eyes scanned every movement around them. A quiet moment passed, just the wind and the distant clucking of chickens. Eli was about to tell her it was time to go when the bush rustled. From the underbrush, the little creature stepped out. It didn't hide. It didn't run. Its slender body moved smoothly across the wet grass, the pale green fur blending into the post-storm earth. The silver stripe along its back glistened in the sunlight, and its deep amber eyes locked onto Lily's, glowing like two polished stones. The fluffy tip of its tail blinked softly, like a silent hello. "Dad, look! It's really here!" Lily cried, raising her hand, but not stepping forward, afraid it might vanish again. Eli stood frozen, heart thudding. He watched the creature, so small, so gentle, yet radiating a quiet strength. It looked at them not with fear, but with familiarity, almost like it knew them. The creature stepped closer to the bag, sniffed it, then nudged its nose against Lily's hand. She let out a delighted laugh. "Dad, it likes me! Look!" As it nibbled the apple slice, the fur around its neck glowed a soft orange, warm and soothing like a paper lantern in the night. Eli stared, speechless. This wasn't a trick of the light or a child's imagination. This was real. "From now on, I'm calling you Miso," Lily said, kneeling down to face it. "Your eyes are the same color as the miso soup my mom used to make. Do you like that?" The creature, now Miso, gave a slight nod and let out a faint chime, like a wooden bell. Lily giggled, overjoyed. Eli stood there, and for the first time, felt something he hadn't in a long while, a strange, quiet connection to something he once doubted. In the days that followed, Miso stopped being a fleeting shadow. It started showing up more often, padding softly through the garden at dusk, its amber eyes glowing in the golden light. Lily became its closest friend. Every time she brought out dried apples, Miso would nuzzle against her, rubbing its cheek in thanks. Eli watched from a distance, his heart slowly growing lighter. He didn't know what Miso was, and maybe he never would. But he knew this: it wasn't here to hurt them. In fact, it had brought something to their lives that he hadn't felt since the day Anna was gone. Peace. And that, to Eli, was more than enough. One afternoon, Eli decided to build a small wooden shelter next to the greenhouse for Miso. He used a few old planks and nailed together a simple lean-to. It wasn't a cage, just a cozy corner where the creature could rest if it wanted to. "You're welcome to stay here if you like," he murmured, placing some dry straw inside. Miso stood nearby, tilting its head curiously. Then it stepped into the little shelter and curled up like a cat. Though it roamed freely, it always returned each evening, as if it had already chosen this place as home. Eli soon discovered something else, something even more remarkable. Whenever he worked the soil, Miso would quietly follow him and sit still nearby. After just a few minutes, the soil in that area would become unusually soft, almost like it had been freshly tilled. One day, Eli planted a few soybean seeds where Miso had been sitting, and within days, they sprouted faster and healthier than the rest. He knelt down beside Miso, who was napping in the shade, its amber eyes half closed. "You didn't just save Lily, did you?" he whispered. "You're helping this land, too." Lily came running up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "See, Dad? Miso's our friend. He likes it here with us." Eli turned and pulled her into a hug. "Yeah, I see that now," he said softly. He looked out over the fields, where the golden light of late afternoon bathed each cornstalk in warmth. With Miso around, this land felt more alive than ever. Not just a place to work, but a real home. A place where he and Lily were no longer alone. Spring in Kansas arrived with gentle sunshine and light winds, sweeping across fields of corn and soybeans, carrying the scent of earth waking up again. Eli Turner stood in the middle of his land, leaning on his hoe, watching rows of green sprouts reach skyward. Since Miso's arrival, the soil seemed to change a little more each day, not just where the creature had rested, but even in nearby areas. The soybean beds near the greenhouse, once stunted and dry, now grew thick and tall, their deep green leaves shining like they'd been fed some magical water. Eli had never been superstitious, but he couldn't deny it anymore. This small creature was doing something to his land. Inside the house, Lily sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs as she munched on a dried apple slice. "Miso loves these, Dad," she said with a wide grin. "I gave him some yesterday and he rubbed his cheek on my hand." Eli looked back and smiled gently. "Yeah, he knows how to pick good friends," he said, his voice low but warm. He glanced out the window and saw Miso curled up under the tree by the shelter, its pale gold fur glowing softly in the sun, eyes closed like it was dreaming. But peace never lasts forever. One morning, as Eli was checking the irrigation system, Mr. Hank, the neighbor who lived a few plots over, showed up by the fence. Hank was a wiry man with silver hair and a habit of carrying a small pair of binoculars everywhere, like a birdwatcher with too much time on his hands. "Eli," he rasped, squinting across the field, "your crops are looking mighty good this year." Eli straightened up and wiped sweat from his brow with an old rag. "Season's been rough," Hank went on, "but your soybeans are growing like something out of a magazine. Got a secret, do you?" "Just hard work," Eli said evenly, revealing nothing. He wasn't one for small talk, and definitely not about Miso. The creature was their secret. something precious, something that didn't need prying eyes. But Hank wasn't the kind to drop things easily. He chuckled dryly and nodded. Hard work, huh? I work hard too. Ain't never seen results like that. His eyes scanned the yard and paused at the little wooden shelter by the greenhouse, the one Miso often curled up beside. A chill crept down Eli's spine. He said nothing, just turned back to his tools, pretending nothing had happened. In the following days, Eli noticed Hank showing up more and more. Sometimes he stood by the fence pretending to fix something on his truck. Other times he wandered out with binoculars, claiming to be bird-watching, but his gaze always drifted toward the farm. One day, while Eli and Lily were feeding the chickens, Lily whispered, "Dad, Mr. Hank was watching Miso. I saw him with a camera yesterday." Eli frowned and looked over. Sure enough, Hank stood off in the distance, an old camera in his hands, the lens pointed toward the barn. Eli clenched his fists, but kept his voice steady. "Don't worry, sweetheart. He's just curious." But the curiosity didn't stop there. One afternoon, while Eli was tilling the soil near the greenhouse, two strangers appeared at the entrance to the farm. They wore gray jackets and dark sunglasses, introducing themselves as wildlife researchers from the city. The taller man, with neatly trimmed hair, spoke first. "Good afternoon, Mr. Turner. We've heard reports of an unusual creature in the area. Have you seen anything out of the ordinary?" His tone was polite, but his sharp eyes scanned Eli's face like they were reading every movement. Eli straightened, one hand still gripping the hoe. He stared back, calm but firm. "There's nothing unusual here," he said flatly. "Just corn, soybeans, and a few chickens. You must be in the wrong place." He didn't like the way they were looking around, like they were searching for something that didn't belong to them. The woman beside him, smaller with her hair tied high, gave a tight smile. "We have a photo from a source. A small creature with glowing fur and large eyes. It's unlike anything we've seen before. If you know anything, you should speak up. This could be a major discovery." She pulled out her phone, ready to show Eli the picture, but he raised his hand. "I don't care what you've seen," Eli said, his voice low but firm. "This is my land and you weren't invited. Now leave." Without waiting for a reply, he turned and walked away. Inside the house, Lily came running up, her face pale with worry. "Dad, were they talking about Miso? Are they trying to catch him?" She clung to his arm, her wide blue eyes full of fear. Eli knelt down, looking her straight in the eye. "No one's taking Miso. I won't let that happen," he said, his voice solid like a promise carved in stone. But deep down, he knew. Things were changing. Their peace was no longer safe. The threat wasn't just Hank anymore. It had faces he didn't recognize, and motives he couldn't trust. That night, Eli didn't sleep. He sat on the porch, flashlight in hand, eyes scanning the dark fields. He started thinking through ways to protect Miso, shield the shelter, hide it from view. The next day, he used old planks to build a low wall around the area near the greenhouse, pretending to patch up part of the fence. He also climbed the old oak tree near the barn and mounted a small camera, something he'd picked up at a local market months ago. "No one comes through here," he muttered under his breath, gripping the hammer tighter. Lily sat beside Miso, gently stroking its soft fur. "Don't be scared, Miso. Dad will protect you," she whispered. Miso looked up, its amber eyes warm and glowing. It let out a soft jingle, like a wooden wind chime, as if to comfort her in return. Eli watched from a distance, his chest heavy. He wasn't afraid for himself, but for Lily, and for Miso, the tiny creature who had somehow become part of their family. Under the pale moonlight, Eli stood in silence, listening to the wind rustle through the fields. He didn't know what those strangers might try next, but he knew one thing for sure. He would do whatever it took to keep Miso safe. Not for the crops, not for the soil, but because Miso was family now. Family they had found together on this old, quiet piece of land. Night in Kansas carried a strange stillness, as if the entire field were holding its breath after days of disruption. Eli Turner sat on the porch, moonlight casting soft shadows across his weathered face. His deep brown eyes were edged with concern. The small camera mounted on the old oak had picked up some blurry footage. Hank lurking near the barn at night, and once, a faint flash of light from Miso's tail glowing in the dark. Eli wasn't sure what Hank had done with the pictures he'd taken. But he knew one thing. Their peaceful life was no longer invisible. And it was only a matter of time before someone tried to take what wasn't theirs. Lily, as always, didn't let her father's worry weigh her down. She kept her routine of bringing dried apple slices to Miso each afternoon, sitting by the wooden shelter and talking about the chickens or the songs her mom used to sing. "Miso, you like it here, don't you?" Lily asked, gently stroking its pale gold fur as sunlight warmed its back. Miso responded with a soft chime, like a wooden bell, and its amber eyes lit up, as if it understood every word. Eli watched from a distance, heart full of both warmth and unease. He didn't want to lose this moment, but he knew the watchful eyes were drawing closer. One evening, as the sunset painted the fields red and gold, Lily ran out to the shelter like she always did. But this time she came back wide-eyed and breathless. "Dad! Miso's gone!" she cried, bursting through the door, clutching the full bag of apple slices. "I called and called! He didn't come!" Eli set down the hammer. He'd been working on a fence post, and got up immediately. "Take a breath, sweetheart. He's probably just wandering nearby," he said, though a deep, cold feeling had already started to grow in his chest. He grabbed the flashlight and took Lily by the hand. They walked down the narrow trail behind the barn. "Miso! Miso!" Lily called, her voice trembling as it echoed across the quiet fields. They searched the whole garden, from the bush where Lily had first seen him, to the greenhouse corner, and even down by the creek where Miso had once saved her during the storm. But there were no signs, no soft chime, no flickering light from his tail. Near the western fence line, Eli stopped. The beam of his flashlight lit up the ground, disturbed soil, a few silver strands of fur, and a muddy footprint, larger than his own. "Someone's been here," he said under his breath, his voice heavy with tension. Lily clung to his arm, tears streaking her cheeks. "Dad, they took Miso, didn't they? I don't want to lose him." She sobbed, her fear pouring out like any 9-year-old child would. Eli knelt and held her close. "I'll find him," he whispered. "Don't cry, sweetheart. Miso's tougher than he looks." But he didn't know if what he said was true. That night, Eli didn't sleep. He sat in front of the small monitor hooked up to the camera feed, rewinding and fast-forwarding the blurry footage from the night before. Nothing clear, just the shadow of a figure near the fence and the faint rustling of movement. He clenched his fists, frustration rising like a flood. "Someone tried to take him," he muttered, his eyes locked on the darkness outside the window. But the bigger question haunted him. Did Miso get away? At the first light of dawn, Lily screamed from the backyard. "Dad, Miso's back!" Eli ran outside and saw her kneeling beside the shelter, arms trembling as she cradled the small creature. Miso lay there, its soft fur dusty, one front leg scraped and bleeding. Its amber eyes looked up at Lily, tired but glowing with the same spark, as if saying, "I made it back." Eli dropped to his knees, carefully checking the wound. Thankfully, it wasn't deep, but Miso had clearly fought to escape something, or someone. He fetched the first aid kit from the house and gently bandaged the leg with a clean strip of cloth. "You're braver than I thought," he whispered, brushing his hand along the shimmering silver stripe on Miso's back. Lily sat beside him, tears rolling down her cheeks. But she was smiling. "I knew you'd come back, Miso. You're my friend." Eli brought out the old woven basket, one Anna used to gather flowers, lined it with dry straw, and gently placed Miso inside. "Rest now. You need time to heal," he said, his voice low but kind. As he watched Miso curl up, its amber eyes fluttering shut, Eli felt a wave of emotion he couldn't name. Gratitude for its return, and anger that anyone had dared hurt it. That whole day, Eli sat on the porch, a cold cup of coffee in his hand, eyes never leaving the small wooden shelter. His mind ran through everything that had happened. Hank with his camera, the strangers calling themselves researchers, the footprints near the fence. They wanted Miso, no doubt about it. But why? Was it because of its ability to heal the land? Because it was a creature no one had ever documented? Eli didn't care about their reasons. To him, Miso wasn't something to be studied or used. Miso was family. He stood up, went inside, and grabbed a sheet of paper and an old pencil. He wrote down a few short lines. Not a diary entry, just a promise to himself. Keep Miso safe. Don't let anyone take him. He sat back down and watched as Lily sang softly beside Miso, her clear voice floating gently through the quiet space. He knew he had to choose, either stay hidden and keep Miso a secret, or open the door to people like those two researchers and let them examine what they didn't understand. Eli pictured Miso in a lab, locked in a cage, prodded by strangers. He thought about those amber eyes, the warm orange glow when it ate an apple slice, the little chime it made when it was happy. Number. He couldn't let that happen. Miso didn't belong in a laboratory. Miso belonged here, with him, with Lily, with the land. "You want Miso to stay with us forever, right?" Eli asked, his deep voice steady in the quiet room. Lily looked up and nodded with conviction. "Yes, Dad. I don't want anyone to take him." Eli smiled and rested a hand on her shoulder. "Then he'll stay. I promise." He stood and looked out the window at the fields. The decision was clear now. Not out of selfishness, but because Miso needed a safe place, a real home. And Eli would do whatever it took to keep that promise. To his daughter, to himself, and to the small creature that had changed their lives. Morning light filtered through the leaves of the old oak tree, casting soft beams over the small wooden shelter where Miso lay. Eli Turner sat on the porch, a fresh mug of coffee warming his hands, his eyes never straying far from the old woven basket where Miso had spent the night. The little creature was still weak, its injured front leg wrapped gently in a strip of clean white cloth. But its amber eyes were brighter now, like a small flame slowly reigniting. Eli let out a breath, the weight in his chest slowly lifting. Miso had come back, and that, to him, meant everything. Lily came running from the house, her small feet brushing through the dew-covered grass. She wore the green sweater her mother had made, clutching a small bag of dried apple slices, an essential gift for every visit with Miso. "Dad, is Miso awake?" she asked, kneeling beside the basket, her blue eyes sparkling with hope. Miso lifted its head, letting out a soft jingle, faint but unmistakable. "You're better," Lily laughed with joy. "Look, Dad." She offered it a piece of dried apple, and as Miso took a bite, the fur around its neck shimmered with that soft orange glow, gentle as a lantern's light in the night. Eli walked over and knelt beside them. "He's doing better," he said warmly, "but let's let him rest a little longer, okay?" He brushed a hand along the silver stripe on Miso's back, feeling its strangely soft fur. This creature hadn't just survived a terrifying night. It had chosen to come back to them. That meant something. To Eli, Miso wasn't just Lily's little friend anymore. He was family. That whole day, Eli sat on the porch, a cold cup of coffee in his hand, eyes never leaving the small wooden shelter. His mind ran through everything that had happened. Hank with his camera, the strangers calling themselves researchers, the footprints near the fence. They wanted Miso, no doubt about it. But why? Was it because of its ability to heal the land? Because it was a creature no one had ever documented? Eli didn't care about their reasons. To him, Miso wasn't something to be studied or used. Miso was family. He stood up, went inside, and grabbed a sheet of paper and an old pencil. He wrote down a few short lines. Not a diary entry, just a promise to himself. Keep Miso safe. Don't let anyone take him. He sat back down and watched as Lily sang softly beside Miso, her clear voice floating gently through the quiet space. He knew he had to choose, either stay hidden and keep Miso a secret, or open the door to people like those two researchers and let them examine what they didn't understand. Eli pictured Miso in a lab, locked in a cage, prodded by strangers. He thought about those amber eyes, the warm orange glow when it ate an apple slice, the little chime it made when it was happy. Number. He couldn't let that happen. Miso didn't belong in a laboratory. Miso belonged here, with him, with Lily, with the land. "You want Miso to stay with us forever, right?" Eli asked, his deep voice steady in the quiet room. Lily looked up and nodded with conviction. "Yes, Dad. I don't want anyone to take him." Eli smiled and rested a hand on her shoulder. "Then he'll stay. I promise." He stood and looked out the window at the fields. The decision was clear now. Not out of selfishness, but because Miso needed a safe place, a real home. And Eli would do whatever it took to keep that promise. To his daughter, to himself, and to the small creature that had changed their lives. Morning light filtered through the leaves of the old oak tree, casting soft beams over the small wooden shelter where Miso lay. Eli Turner sat on the porch, a fresh mug of coffee warming his hands, his eyes never straying far from the old woven basket where Miso had spent the night. The little creature was still weak, its injured front leg wrapped gently in a strip of clean white cloth. But its amber eyes were brighter now, like a small flame slowly reigniting. Eli let out a breath, the weight in his chest slowly lifting. Miso had come back, and that, to him, meant everything. Lily came running from the house, her small feet brushing through the dew-covered grass. She wore the green sweater her mother had made, clutching a small bag of dried apple slices, an essential gift for every visit with Miso. "Dad, is Miso awake?" she asked, kneeling beside the basket, her blue eyes sparkling with hope. Miso lifted its head, letting out a soft jingle, faint but unmistakable. "You're better," Lily laughed with joy. "Look, Dad." She offered it a piece of dried apple, and as Miso took a bite, the fur around its neck shimmered with that soft orange glow, gentle as a lantern's light in the night. Eli walked over and knelt beside them. "He's doing better," he said warmly, "but let's let him rest a little longer, okay?" He brushed a hand along the silver stripe on Miso's back, feeling its strangely soft fur. This creature hadn't just survived a terrifying night. It had chosen to come back to them. That meant something. To Eli, Miso wasn't just Lily's little friend anymore. He was family. In the days that followed, Miso recovered quickly. The wound on its leg began to heal, and soon it was walking around the garden again, though with a slight limp. Lily never left its side, bringing dried apple slices and telling stories about the songs her mother used to sing, or the white hen that got lost during the storm. Miso often lay next to her, amber eyes half closed, the tip of its tail flickering softly like a quiet reply. Eli watched from a distance, a warmth blooming in his chest. He had never imagined that a strange little creature like Miso could bring the same kind of peace Anna once did when she was alive. But it wasn't just Eli and Lily who noticed the change. The land around the farm began to come alive in ways that were hard to explain. The rows of corn near the barn grew taller, the ears fuller, even though the weather hadn't been ideal. The dry, stubborn soil near the greenhouse, where Eli used to struggle with the plow, had turned soft and rich, especially where Miso had passed by. One afternoon, Eli planted a few soybean seeds near the tree Miso liked to nap under. Just 2 days later, the sprouts had broken through the soil, faster than anything he'd ever seen. He knelt down, pressed his hand into the earth, and felt something strange but comforting. "You really are something," he whispered, glancing at Miso curled up beneath the tree. The change didn't go unnoticed by others. Hank, the nosy neighbor, still hovered near the fence now and then, but he spoke less. Eli noticed he no longer carried his camera or binoculars. One night, while Eli was checking the irrigation lines, Hank approached quietly, holding a wooden cane in one hand. "Eli, I've been meaning to say something," he began, avoiding eye contact. "I took a few pictures of that creature. Thought about sending them to some folks in the city. But then I saw it." Eli stayed silent, his hand tightening around the hoe, but he didn't interrupt. Hank's voice dropped. "Last night, I saw it near the old apple tree in my yard. You know, the one that's been dead for years. This morning it had new buds, real ones." He gave a dry chuckle, not mocking, but humbled. "I deleted the pictures. No one would believe me anyway, and I don't want them to." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Eli standing there, surprised and deeply relieved. Word of Eli's miraculous farm spread quietly through the small community. No one said anything outright, but other farmers started to notice. They saw Eli's fields growing greener, the crops stronger, even though he didn't use fancy machines or expensive fertilizer. At the local seed market, one vendor leaned over and whispered, "You've got some good stuff, Eli. What's your secret?" Eli just smiled and shook his head. "No secret. Just good soil." But deep down, he knew the truth, and he kept it close. Each evening, the three of them, Eli, Lily, and Miso, sat together on the porch, sharing dried apple slices as the breeze rustled through the trees. Lily told stories with wide gestures and a bright voice, her laughter carrying across the yard. "Miso, you helped Dad plant corn today, didn't you? You're amazing." Miso nestled at her feet, the tip of its tail flickering in gentle agreement. Eli sat in his wooden chair, listening, occasionally adding a quiet comment. He watched his daughter, watched Miso, and looked out at the silver-lit fields stretching to the horizon. He had never seen his land so alive, not just because of the crops, but because it finally felt like home. One day, as Eli passed the old oak tree, he paused and touched its trunk. At the base, several new shoots were growing, even though he hadn't planted anything there. He smiled and looked toward Miso, who was trotting along near the barn. "You're not just Lily's friend," he murmured. "You're the heart of this place." Then he turned back toward the house, feeling lighter than he had in years. The neighbors might stay curious, but they didn't push. And Eli knew, as long as he kept Miso safe, this land would continue to thrive. Spring in Kansas brought warm winds that carried away the last breath of winter. Fields of corn and soybeans stretched into the distance, painted in soft shades of green. Eli Turner stood in the middle of it all, his calloused hands brushing over new soybean leaves, feeling the quiet energy pulsing through the soil. He looked up at the wide blue sky, dotted with a few white clouds, his heart at peace. This season promised to be a good one, not just because of the weather, but because the land now held something special, something he couldn't explain, something he fully believed in. By the little wooden shelter, Miso lay curled beneath the shade of the old oak tree, its pale golden fur glowing softly in the spring sunlight. The wound on its leg had fully healed, leaving behind only a faint scar beneath the shimmering silver stripe on its back. Its amber eyes were half closed, and the tip of its tail blinked gently whenever Lily came running. The girl, her blonde ponytail bouncing and green sweater snug as always, carried her usual pouch of dried apple slices. "Miso, you've got to eat extra today. Dad says the crops are growing better this season because of you," she giggled, kneeling to offer a treat. Miso lifted its head, let out a soft chime like a wooden bell, and rubbed its cheek against her hand. The fur around its neck lit up with a warm orange glow. Eli watched them from a distance and smiled. He was used to Miso's presence now, not just as some strange creature, but as a quiet friend of the family. Over the past few months, Miso hadn't just brought life back to the land. It had brought joy to Lily, and for Eli, a kind of peace he thought he'd lost since Anna passed away. He turned back to his work, planting more corn near the greenhouse. But this time, he chose seeds from the patch of soil Miso had once rested on. That soil was rich, soft, and full of life. Eli knew it would grow the strongest crops. One early spring's day, Eli decided to bring a batch of those special seeds to the local farmers' association in town. He didn't say much, just packed them in an old burlap sack and handed them to Mr. Sam, the man who ran the group. "Try planting these," Eli said, his voice as steady as ever. Mr. Sam, an older man with snow-white hair, raised a brow and chuckled. "You never give away much, Eli. But all right, I'll give him a shot." Eli nodded and headed home without further explanation. Weeks later, word began to spread quietly among the farmers. The seeds from Eli had sprouted with unusual vigor. Even in the poorest soil, the plants were tall, sturdy, and deep green, surpassing every expectation. Mr. Sam brought one of the young plants to the market, holding it up like a prize. "Look at this, Eli Turner's seed. Don't know what he's doing, but it's nothing short of a miracle." And from then on, they simply called it Eli's seed, a plain name. No one asked too many questions, but everyone seemed to understand. It was something special. Eli heard the news from a vendor at the market, but he only smiled quietly. He didn't need recognition or praise. He just wanted his land to thrive, and Miso to stay safe. Around town, people began to look at Eli differently, not with suspicion or curiosity, but with quiet respect. They didn't ask him about his secret, and he didn't offer it. But when neighbors passed by his farm, they'd tip their hats or nod, as if they could sense something sacred growing behind the rows of corn and soybeans. Miso continued to live peacefully with the father and daughter. It was no longer a fleeting shadow in the bushes, but Lily's loyal friend, Eli's silent guardian of the land. Each evening, it would walk around the garden, its amber eyes glowing in the setting sun. Wherever it rested, the soil grew softer. Lily would chase after it, singing old songs, her small hands dancing in the wind. "Miso, you're my little star," she'd cry, and Miso would nuzzle her leg, its tail blinking in agreement. One quiet evening, Eli sat at the wooden table inside, updating his crop journal, a tradition he'd kept since inheriting the farm from his father. He wrote simply, "Spring. Soil better than ever. New seeds. Strong results." But then he paused, glancing out the window. Lily was sitting under the porch, playing her harmonica, the clear notes rising into the cool evening air. The wind rustled gently across the fields. Miso lay curled beside her, its amber eyes closed, silver fur glinting softly under the moonlight. And for a moment, quiet, still, and perfect, Eli felt like everything was exactly where it was meant to be. Eli stood, walked out onto the porch, and sat beside his daughter. He reached into the pouch Lily always carried and pulled out a dried apple slice, offering it to Miso. The little creature lifted its head and ate slowly, the soft orange glow from its neck casting a warm shimmer, like a silent thank you. "Dad," Lily asked, pausing her harmonica, her bright blue eyes looking up at him, "do you think he likes it here?" Eli nodded, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "Yeah, he does. And I like having him here, too." He looked up at the night sky. The clouds drifted slowly, shifting from white to soft pink, then into pale lavender, as if something magical was still unfolding, not just on the land, but in their hearts. Eli thought of Anna, of the evenings she used to sit on this very porch, singing lullabies to Lily. He didn't feel alone anymore. He had Lily. He had Miso. And the land, more alive than ever. A rare, quiet smile spread across his face, genuine and full, as he felt something he hadn't in a long time. Wholeness. Lily began playing her harmonica again, the gentle melody floating across the field, carried by the spring breeze. Miso let out a soft chime, and the wind rustled through the trees in reply. Eli sat there, listening, letting time move as it pleased. Spring had arrived, and for him, the true miracle wasn't just in what grew from the soil, but in this little family bound together by a strange creature, an old patch of land, and a love that needed no words,